The Eugene Johnson Show. The Eugene Johnson Show. The Eugene Johnson Show.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Eugene Johnson Show. I'm your host, Eugene Johnson, from the Crypto Crew. Now, a couple weeks ago I made the show, and it was about my personal paranormal experiences. Well, tonight I will be making one involving my cousin and myself and our paranormal experiences when we were kids. My cousin Melanie and I grew up together. She's a little bit younger than me. She turns 31 and she turns 32 next May, and I turn 32 in October. So she's a little bit younger than me. Matter of fact, for her 31st birthday this year, last month, she went to Waverly Hills for a all-night ghost hunt. So anyway, I'll be talking a little bit about that and our experiences when we were children. Like I said, I was raised with my grandfather and grandmother all my life, and my cousin Melanie just happened to be a tomboy, which was really good for me because I didn't have many key friends or anything to play with, so we used to go down to her house all the time. And a couple weeks ago I also said that we'd be talking about two roads. The first road, of course, was Red River Road. Now this road is called Muddy Creek Road, and it's also out in the country. But anyway, my cousin and I used to play together all the time. We'd ride bikes, go in the hills, the woods, wherever we could go, just to play around, and she lived out in the country. We had just moved from the country to the city, which I hated, but at least I got to go, play in the country with my cousin. So we would play, and as a matter of fact, my uncle and aunt had just purchased a house. This house was built, I'm going to say, in the 1700s. It was originally a cabin. And, lo and behold, through the years, these people who had this cabin decided to add more rooms to it. So anyway, they built this house, which was just basically additional rooms to the cabin. So, they, and then, lo and behold, about late 80s, early 90s, my uncle and my aunt purchased the house. It was a pretty good, little piece of land along with it. It had a barn, a shed, a couple of sheds, and something I'm going to get to later. It had a really, really creepy, as my grandpa used to call them, they called cisterns, which is like a fruit cellar, storm cellar way back in the country. That's how I know them. They called them cisterns, and it used to hold water. It was a well. Many years ago, somebody turned it into a shelter or a fruit cellar, something along that line, but it was outside the house. It was behind the house. And basically what they had done was the well was on top of the hill, but they dug down into the ground around the house, behind the house, and basically put a rock fence straight up and a door in the middle and made it a storm shelter. So needless to say, just around that area was creepy itself. But that's not what I'm going to go into today. Today I'm going to be talking about what we experienced in that house, me and my cousin Melanie. Well, the first story I'm going to tell you is, and we were complete idiots, absolutely idiots to be doing it, but we didn't know any better. We were just probably 7-8 years old apiece, if that. So my cousin's sister had a Ouija board, and not knowing any better, and nothing about the paranormal or anything like that when we was kids, and she didn't know anything about the paranormal. See, back when I was a kid, you could go to Walmart and buy a Ouija board in the games section, in the board game section. So, needless to say, she's also my cousin. Her name's Sheila. She bought an Ouija board thinking it was a board game. So she didn't want it anymore, so she gave it to Melanie. And we were down there one night, and she got it out, and we started to play on it. And we were asking stupid questions. And see, I didn't remember until me and her started talking last week, and she was telling me, she was asking me if I remembered all this stuff that happened down there. And as I thought about it really good and hard, yeah, it started coming back to me real quick. But we were sitting there. It was really late at night. I remember it was a weekend. And she dared me earlier that day to ask. We kind of knew what the Ouija board was, but we, didn't know it'd do anything. Plus, it never worked for us, because, of course, we didn't take the right precautions and all that stuff going into this. But so we started getting very dangerous with this, and it was our own stupidity. I mean, my grandparents didn't even know what a Ouija board was, and I'm sure her mother and father didn't know what a Ouija board was either. I've seen, and at that point I had seen them in movies, so and I knew that they were supposed to talk to you if you talk to them. So, we sit down, and she had dared me earlier that day when we were outside riding bicycles around the country. She dared me to ask if it was a demon and if it wanted to kill us. So, being a kid and it being a dare, of course, right before my grandmother, yelled up the stairs for me to, come on down because it was time to go. I run downstairs, and Melanie runs down behind me to tell me goodbye, and tell me that she'll see me, probably next weekend, because we used to go every weekend to my cousin's house. And I know something was funny because we left, and the next week, we go back, and she's completely white, and and she actually sells me the Ouija board for $0.25. And I said, I thought you'd never get rid of this because, your sister gave it to you. And she was like, just don't worry about it. Well, come to find out, I didn't know anything about it till many, many years later, that apparently that when she went back into the room, the planchette that's on the Ouija board was setting at yes when it was sitting in the middle of the board when I left the room, but it was setting at yes at this point. And when she come in, she said it slid across the floor. So she boxed it up, put tape over it, and then told me that if I wanted to buy it, I could have it for $0.25. Needless to say, I bought the Ouija board and had no experiences whatsoever because, of course, I never used it anyway. I just bought it because, a Ouija board, hey, which was kind of stupid, but I was a kid and didn't know any better. Now, some more stuff about this house. That was the first experience between me and her. The second one, well, a little bit more information on the house. Like I said, it was a cabin, and they built on more rooms to it. And according to her, she did some research here recently, as a matter of fact, and found out that the house had been there, like I said previously, from the 1700s, and that somebody had been hung there. They had hung themselves above the kitchen. The kitchen and my cousin's upstairs room and a couple more rooms to the back were all the cabin. They built on a living room and a couple other rooms, but where my cousin's room was, It was kind of like a long corridor hallway that had steps that you had to go up. But apparently, the research she did, she found out that someone had committed suicide by hanging themselves there. We didn't know nothing about it, and of course, being kids, we weren't scared of anything. We had no reason to be. We didn't understand what was going on at that time. And another story involving me and her, and I remember this very, very well. It was in the middle of summer, and I think it's about July, August, about the way it is now, really hot, muggy. And we were upstairs in her room playing. I think we was playing cards or something, some kind of game. And our parents, my grandparents and her parents, were sitting outside on the front porch or on the side porch, I can't remember which. But we were sitting there, everything was quiet as it could be, and all of a sudden, something knocks on the wall. She looks at me and goes, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah, I heard it." And we didn't get creeped out at that time. We just, kind of thought it was funny. We first thought that her older brother was actually trying to prank us. So I got up and went to the door to the opposite room, because there was my cousin's room here, another room over here, and then another room over here, and then a second set of steps that led you back downstairs. So we thought it was one of her brothers in there messing around. So I ran up to the wall and I knocked, 3 or 4 times, just playing and laughing and stuff, because I figured it was her brother coming in, because they were staying there at the time. And I figured it was her brother, so I knocked on the wall really loud, and we didn't hear nothing until we started to turn around and go back to the game we were playing on the floor, and we was fixing to sit down on the floor, and whatever this knock was knocking, it sounded like a really big man took his arm and slammed it as hard as he could against the wall 3 times. So hard it made my cousins, she had some pictures and stuff on the wall, they fell off. And anyway, at that time, we got really freaked out. So the first thing we did was we were like, we were going to jump on her brother, tell him, "What do you think you're doing?" Trying to scare us. We run into that room and it's empty. We run downstairs as fast as we could. That's when I really got scared. That's when she really got scared, because in the amount of time that passed between, the big 3 loud bangs, there was no time for anybody to run out of that room and go to the other room and get downstairs. There was just no time. And her brother was a pretty big guy, so he couldn't move really that fast. So we didn't know what was going on. We run down the stairs and out the kitchen. Yeah, I remember now. They were sitting on a side porch next to the kitchen. And we run out the back door, which was in the kitchen, and we run out screaming. And they asked what was wrong and all this stuff, and we said we'd heard knocking, and they were just like, "Oh, you kids, you need to stop playing such stupid stuff." They didn't believe us. So the first thing I thought of was, "Hey, is Wayne here?" That was Melanie's brother. It was like, "Is Wayne here at all?" "No, he's been gone all day." And come to find out, he was in the next county. So that was the second experience that we had. And then I remember this one very, very well too. This one really, really scared me and her both. We were actually sitting in her room, as always, playing. And it was another summer day, so of course my grandparents and her parents were outside, sitting outside, having watermelon and drinking ice cold tea and all that stuff, and just talking. Well, we would have been outside, but we'd been outside all day and kind of got hot from riding bikes all day, so we decided to go upstairs to her room where we can sit in the air conditioning and be cool. So we're up there just playing, minding our own business, and all of a sudden, we look at the next room, the same room that the knocking happened, and we heard something sound like a footstep. You know how old wood sounds when you step on it, especially in a floor? Well, it made the creaky noise, and we look up, and the door just goes as slow as it can be. It opens by itself. We didn't pay any attention to it, so she jumped up, run over there, closed the door back. And she come back and she sat down and she said, that's happened for the past 3 days. She said it happened the past 3 days within an hour of each other. So I was like, really? And she said, yeah. So we didn't pay any more attention to it. We thought, that the air condition quite possibly could have made the door, kind of, well, in the country, when it gets muggy here, sometimes doors can shrink in the humidity, and in the air condition, sometimes they either shrink or they can expand. So that's what we thought it was, is just that the door had loosened up in its frame and just decided to pop open. She goes and runs and shuts the door and comes back to me and sits down, and we start playing again. And this is when it started getting really freaky for me and her, because we're sitting there and we hear my grandmother and her mother coming up the stairs talking. Never will forget it as long as I live. So we get up and go over there to see what they wanted, and one of them was laughing, the other one was just talking. We look down and it's empty. The staircase is empty. She runs back into her room, peeps out the shades, and she sees all of them sitting there at the picnic table. Nobody in the house whatsoever. She got scared. I got scared. And we didn't know what to do, so we sat down, and she sat on one side of the bed, I sat on the other side of the bed. And we were just maybe 8 years old apiece. It's been a long time ago, but me and her both got to talking about it last week, and we remembered a lot of stuff that went on back there. And so we sat down on the bed, and I didn't want to freak her out because she was already scared. She'd already turned white. I was sitting there trying to keep calm, and the thing that really scared us was we were sitting there, and it's very, very quiet. You could only hear the air conditioning running, and it was kind of quiet, so it's all the sound that was going was the air conditioning. Whatever come up those stairs before, disguised as my grandmother and my aunt's voice, now changed to sounding like an army running up the stairs at full force, stomping as hard as they could on each step. She screamed as loud as she could because it sounded like thunder inside your house. So she screamed as loud as she could. I screamed. We both started crying. I ran outside. She ran outside. And again, as always, it was always, oh, you kids need to quit playing those stupid games. They never believed us. But now that, that we've grown up and everything like that, I believe my grandparents were never the type of person to believe in the paranormal or have experiences with it as much as I did and as much as my cousin did. So, they never believed it. But there was a lot of stuff that happened there, an experience that I had in the house. My cousin had actually went and stayed with a friend of hers, for a overnight party and she was coming home, and I had been there maybe 10-15 minutes. I was a little bit older then. I was probably 11, 12 years old. They were still lived in the same house, which it's now demolished. But I remember very vividly sitting on the couch in the living room by myself, because, like I said, there was a kitchen. The kitchen was pretty far off because there was a living room, a den area, and then the kitchen. And so I was sitting in the living room at the front part of the house, which happened to be one of the rooms that were added. But I remember sitting there very vividly, and my aunt had been doing some housework and house cleaning, so she had the vacuum cleaner sitting there in the corner, and it was unplugged. Well, I was sitting there and everything, I could hear them talking in there, and I was just sitting there watching some TV and listening to them talk. But the TV was on low, and hearing them talk, I kind of got sleepy. So, I was yawning and stuff, waiting for her to come home so we could have something to do or talk about or something. So, I put my feet up on the coffee table, and I was sitting there, and TV sound was down, and next thing I know, the vacuum cleaner pops on, completely by itself, with the plug out of it. It didn't get no electric power from anywhere in the house. There was no way that it could have kicked on, but it kicked on for a good, I'm gonna say probably 10-15 seconds. As a matter of fact, so long that my grandmother yelled at me and told me to quit playing with the vacuum cleaner. And I was like, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know whether to scream or what, because I was sitting there, and next thing you know, the vacuum cleaner comes on, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, what do I do? And I got my my stuff jumped, because they thought I was playing with a vacuum cleaner, and I was like, no. So that happened. I got up and went to the front porch and shut the door behind me and stayed out on the front porch all day that day until she came home. And then when she came home, we stayed outside most of the night. So that was mine and her experiences in that house. Like I said before, previously, the house has now been destroyed, and the landowner down there has it as just a farm now. So, but there's one more story involving Muddy Creek Road. This one actually involves my uncle and my cousin's brother, Wayne, who I was talking about earlier. It involves those two. This was probably in 1992 or early 1992. I think there was still snow on the ground. But my uncle and my cousin Wayne were out riding, riding around. Like, that's what the thing was to do back then, was, if you didn't have any money to go shopping or go see movies or anything like that, you went and rode around. So, and gas was cheap then, so they would go out and ride around, and my uncle told me this about 3 or 4 years ago, and I never did forget it. So he goes to drop Wayne off at his vehicle, because they had been riding around through town in my uncle's car. He had an Oldsmobile Cutlass, 70s model. I can't remember what year, but it was a really pretty car, slick car. And the thing to do then was put CBs in the cars. So my uncle had one, my cousin had one, and they would talk all night on CB and ride around all night. That was the only thing to do around here, and either that or you died of boredom. So anyway, they were riding around one night, and he goes to drop Wayne off at his house, which is on Muddy Creek, same house that all this stuff happened to me and happened to her at. And they pull into this big gravel driveway and go up right next to where Wayne's parked, which is kind of up next to the barn. They shut the car off and they're sitting there a few minutes. Their eyes hadn't adjusted, and my uncle and Wayne both, because I talked to him here recently about 2 weeks ago. They say that they turned the car off and were sitting there and just had started to talk, and my uncle bent down to get a Mountain Dew out of the cooler next to Wayne's feet. This on the passenger side. He reached down to get a Mountain Dew, and when I think Wayne reached in to get one too, so when they both bent down, and right when they were coming back up, he says something big and very hairy jumped over the hood of that car. And the way he explains it, he said you could only see pieces of hair on the arm, and it's kind of like you know how an obstruction is standing in front of a light and the obstruction looks completely black. He said you could see a little bit of the hair from the light that was in the yard, because we had one of those they had big barn lights in the yard, one big yellow barn lights that you used to could get to put in your lot or whatever. And so they had that, and that was the only light they seen. So whatever this was jumped over the car using one hand and pole vaulted over the car. And he said that you could feel the car dip very, very forcefully almost into the ground. He said it was big, it was heavy, and it was hairy. They got out with pistols and everything else and went to look for whatever this was, and they never found nothing. They didn't find any tracks. They heard some stuff in the brush on the other side of the road, because it's basically the farm, the main road, Muddy Creek Road, and then across that was the creek, which is why it's got its name, Muddy Creek Road, and the woods beyond that. And he said they heard some brush and stuff cracking and stuff like that. So they stayed basically on the edge of the road right before you enter the woods. And of course, you know, as soon as you enter the woods, you go maybe 5 feet and there's the creek. So they said they heard some branches breaking and stuff like that, and they turned around to go back to the car. And he said, him and Wayne both said, now they didn't tell me this until about 2 weeks ago, but they told me the story. My uncle first told it to me years ago, but they remembered a couple weeks ago when I got to talking to them about it, that right when they got back to the car, that something screamed so loud that every dog in Muddy Creek, on Muddy Creek Road, started barking. And they kept barking and kept barking like they felt threatened by it. He said he never heard a scream like that before in his life. Wayne said the same thing. He said he never heard a scream like that. And you know, my uncle and my cousin, we always, you know, being my grandparents raised me, you know, they were kind of old, and so, you know, my uncle used to live with my grandparents for a while before he moved out. But the point is that when we'd want to do something, you know, he had a nephew, you know, of course me, to do something with, so we go hang out in the woods and stuff like that. So I mean, I've been in the woods with both of them, my uncle and my cousin. We know animal screams. As a matter of fact, they taught me most of the stuff I know. We know tracks, we know animal screams, we know all that, and it was something that they had never heard before. So that was quite maybe possibly an encounter with a Bigfoot or dog man. But anyway, guys, it's getting kind kind of lengthy into the show, so anyway, be sure and stay tuned the next Friday, because I will be bringing more stories to you. I've had a lot of friends and relatives contact me over the past couple of weeks to give me their accounts on some of the things, so I've got a lot of stuff to tell. Also, we'll soon be doing a special Eugene Johnson Show at Bobby Mackey's in Wilder, Kentucky. That's one of the most haunted places known to man besides Waverly Hills. But the cool thing about Bobby Mackey's is you can pay a one price and go in there and take the tour, and you can film as much as you want. You can take EVPs, you can take EMF detectors, all that stuff, and they don't get mad at you. You can't do that at Waverly Hills for some reason. So I will be making a special Eugene Johnson Show when we go, which will probably be in, I'm going to say, in the middle of July. So we're getting that set up, and I will be doing a investigation there. And like I said, stay tuned next Friday, guys, because I'm going to try to do the show every 2 weeks. So, and by the way, if you have any questions or anything to ask me, you can personally get a hold of me at Hulk18227 at yahoo.com. That's Hulk18227 at yahoo.com. That's my personal email. I answer every email. If you've got any encounters or anything that you want to tell me, all you got to do is leave your first name. I will specifically not mention your last name on the show, so you will have complete anonymity. So but anyway, guys, this has been the Eugene Johnson Show. You guys take care, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Очень смажные люди. Очень смажные люди. Очень смажные люди.